Hello everyone and welcome back to another review. Today we are talking about one of the most hyped up films of the year, and that is Sean Baker's Anora. It got a lot of festival buzz back at Cannes where it premiered, and there's been a lot of talk about the Oscars and that this is probably one of the front runners. Personally, I find myself caring less and less about the Academy Awards with each year that passes because it's such a pompous organization that fails to recognize some of my personal favorites each year because they exclude so many genres. Regardless, I was very excited, and full disclosure, I'm pretty new to Sean Baker as a filmmaker. I watched The Florida Project a couple weeks ago for the first time. Absolutely loved it. One thing that really strikes me about Sean Baker as both a director and a storyteller is how he's able to take these characters that come from facets of life that we may otherwise dismiss, and he humanizes them and makes them feel authentic in a way that we can empathize with, even if they might make some self-destructive decisions, as the characters do in The Florida Project. You still want their lives to change for the better, and you're rooting for them every step of the way. In Anora, we follow Annie, played by Mikey Madison, who is a stripper living in New York City, and she happens upon a Russian client who is vacationing in the US, and he seems to want more than just a dance or even sex. He makes her his personal escort after some time, and 2 weeks later, he thinks there's enough of a connection for them to get married. That way, she can get her Cinderella story, and he can avoid returning to Russia with his overbearing, overprotective, oligarch parents. As you can expect, when his parents do find out about the wedding, they are not pleased, and they send some of their henchmen to come and try to force this man, whose name is Vanya, to annul the wedding. When I watched The Florida Project, to me it also stood out because it didn't really feel like a traditional story in that there's an introduction, rising tension, a climax, and then a resolution. It doesn't fit the traditional story format. Instead, it's just kind of a slice of life film that presents its characters in a very authentic manner and shows us what their daily lives are like and how they can change for better or worse as certain elements enter and leave their lives. Anora is definitely much more traditional in a storytelling sense than The Florida Project is, but it still has that Sean Baker feel to it, especially with our lead character, Annie. Mikey Madison is terrific in this. I mean, she shows a level of range in the latter half of the film that is extraordinary. I think without a doubt she will be winning some awards later this year. I don't think Annie is a perfect lead. In fact, I wish we would have gotten more about her and her life before the events of the film take place. It does kind of jump right into the action. But I think it's a testament to Sean Baker that I still felt that she was very humanized, despite the fact that we don't have a lot of time to get to know her before this love story begins, before so many of these other elements are thrown in, and all of a sudden the dialogue is so fast-paced and there's so much going on that you don't really get many slower, intimate moments with the characters until later on. I will say this movie is significantly different than what I was expecting. The trailers certainly painted it to be more of a love story, a Cinderella story, which is how a lot of people have described what the first act feels like, and it kind of is, although it definitely still has this debaucherous feel to it in that we have this young, rich kid meeting a sex worker. They engage in a lot of intercourse and a lot of parties, but then it evolves into something else, something much bigger, varying in tone. The movie is surprisingly much funnier than I was expecting, like unbelievably funny. This is probably the most I've laughed in the theater in a long time. Around the midpoint of the film, there is like a 20-minute long sequence that feels like a screwball bit pulled straight out of a Coen Brothers movie. But it's also much more tragic than I was anticipating. I think the film is very much about dreams and hopefulness, and how reality can be so much more disappointing than that. The allure of new love, of big dreams and riches, and how fast those can turn on somebody. It's not perfect though. I don't think the film needed to be 2 hours and 20 minutes long, and it easily could have been less than that if they shortened some of these comedy bits that go on for such a long time. Yes, the side characters are quite funny. I'm probably about to butcher this actor's name, but Karen Kargulian as Toros, one of Vanya's father's assistants, constantly complains about the attention spans and work ethics of Gen Z, and it had my audience gasping in laughter. In terms of the supporting cast, he was an all-around standout. When he first gets the phone call informing him about the wedding between Vanya and Annie, he's attending a baptism and lets out an audible gasp when he learns the news, and everyone's like, "What the hell's wrong with you, man?" But there are times where the comedy is so overplayed that I think it loses that sense of authenticity that the rest of the film and Sean Baker's filmography as a whole is able to encapsulate so well. Just to give an example, one of the muscles that works for Toros constantly bitches and moans about a head injury that he received when trying to subdue Annie, and it's overused, man. It goes on for too long, and I think the film loses focus on what it was trying to do before. Thankfully, it does eventually regain its footing. In terms of the ending, I can understand why many may see it as a cheat. It's not a satisfying ending in a traditional sense because this isn't a fairy tale. It's meant to be much more lifelike. And there was a point in the ending in which I thought it was about to veer into a very cliche direction, and just as it was about to, it subverted my expectations once again and gives Annie one last beautiful moment of tender catharsis. Like, yes, I have my issues with how brief our introduction is to her as a person in the beginning of the film, but the ending actually tells us a lot not only about the old Annie, but also the new Annie and how she's been changed or not changed by the events of the film. All in all, I think it's a great movie that just runs a little too long and occasionally loses focus on the main character, who is easily the most enthralling attribute when she's allowed to shine. It has some great commentary on classism, sex work, and the complete lack of accountability for those who have been raised and showered in big money. I'm going to give Anora 4 stars. As always, I encourage you to see the film for yourself, come to your own conclusions, and let me know down in the comments what you think of it. And before you head out, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.